For the first time in a long time, the Green Bay Packers are not in need of another receiver. They should still go try and trade for Tee Higgins if they can.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. The Green Bay Packers are in great shape at receiver. Between Jayden Reed and Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, you add the depth pieces, Bo Melton, Malik Heath. We'll see what Grant Dubose can be. They've got terrific young tight ends who aren't receivers, of course, but they are pass catchers. Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, add in Ben Sims, and then what you're getting from Aaron Jones as a receiver. It's not a need. For the first time since like 2014, it's not really a need. But it doesn't look like the Cincinnati Bengals are going to come to a long-term contract extension with Tee Higgins. They have franchise tagged him. That means if he signs it and everything goes through, he has $21 million this year. That's a lot of money. It's not top of market, but it's a lot. It's more than the Packers are paying anybody to play receiver. He is the kind of receiver, a big ball-winning type player, a bucket getter, who is also on the Packers timeline. I think generally timelines are way overrated. But you don't, with a young team, like last year, we talked about this. Every Dayers will remember, going into the season, the idea of bringing in a veteran, it was anathema to me. Let the young guys cook. Well, now we see the young guys. Can you bring in a young guy who can tilt the field for you in a way that no one else on your team can? I think Christian Watson, at his best, can do a lot of the things as a vertical threat that Tee Higgins can. Tee Higgins is a different kind of vertical threat. He's more in that like Mike Williams mode where you can throw it to him down the sideline. He's going to win with body control, with contested catchability, not with speed like Christian Watson. But on 3rd and 6, you can also throw him a slant or a stop route and just let him go win. Throw him a back shoulder fade. He has a different kind of skill set than any current Packers receiver. And because no one else on that offense is making any kind of money, they could potentially have the money to make a big time move like this. And I put this out on the X machine, the Twitters, and I got a very mixed response, mostly a no. Most Packer fans did not want to do a move like this. And I think it is faith in this young group. And I understand that. I understand they were an elite offense in the second half of the season without Tee Higgins. But I also look at the kind of teams that they're going to have to beat. You can never have too many of these guys. And, you know, for as nice as the playoff run was from Romeo Doubs, a lot of the underlying metrics over the course of the season were not very good. He's a touchdown scorer. He's a red zone threat. But in the rest of the field of play, he has not been particularly productive or efficient. One of the worst yards per route run against man coverage since he entered the league 2 years ago. He was supposed to be their route running guru, and against man coverage, he's not very good. Second reaction plays, stuff like that. Like, he's terrific. So It doesn't have to be Tee Higgins either. Are there other players out there that could move the needle for them? Now, I like the idea of Tee Higgins. You're probably going to have to give him a contract. Okay. You give really good players a contract. He's 26. And it would be appropriate that a player that Packer fans clamored for, that they said, oh, the Packers should have taken, by the way, he's 25. He just turned 25, Tee Higgins. They wanted Tee Higgins in the draft instead of Jordan Love. It turns out Jordan Love is really good, but it also turns out Tee Higgins is really good. It could be the kind of situation where you could have both. And so here was what I suggested. Not 25, but I was talking to one of our Locked On Bengals hosts, James Rapine. I said, would you just do 25 for Tee Higgins straight up? And he was like, yeah, I would if I were the Bengals. And I was like, okay. What if on draft night, the corners go early? They don't have a first round grade on any of these safeties. And they're sitting there going, well, now what? He's tagged. The Bengals don't want to give him the guaranteed money in the second year that he's going to want. Would you do it for, you're not going to get somebody better than Tee Higgins at 25. And he's still only 25 years old. There are going to be guys that you could draft there who are 23. 2 years younger. Now, much less expensive, but this is the Peter Griffin box. Those guys could be anything. They could even be players who are as good as Tee Higgins. We know Tee Higgins is awesome. The Bengals probably want to send him to the NFC. They would probably take a little bit of a price discount to send him to the NFC. And I was trying to we were trying to go back and forth and haggle a little bit. And I was like, okay, well, would you do, 25 for the Bengals second and Tee Higgins? And then he was like, no, probably not. Like, you'd have to throw more stuff in there. Like, did the Packers have a second? And I was like, yeah, but if you're going to do that, then you might as well. If you're going to do 41 and 58, then you might as well just do, it's the same as 25. Just do 25 and you get to have 41. And this is why I bring this up. 41, getting 41 from the Jets. If the Packers want to get crazy, if they want to get frisky, it doesn't have to be for Tee Higgins. Who knows? Maybe Antoine Winfield Jr. wants to get traded, wants to get signed to the franchise tag and traded. It gives the Packers a lot of flexibility because you're not losing that much going from 25 to 41 in a draft that is deep. It's top heavy at quarterback, at receiver, but still pretty deep at receiver. But you have this elite tier. At 25, like, you're probably not going to get a player that is that much of a difference maker versus 41. So could you be willing to say, hey, let's get into one of these markets? But it has to be for the right kind of player. And to me, Tee Higgins, a 25-year-old, no doubt, alpha receiver in terms of the way that he wins. I don't mean like he's your receiver one necessarily, though I think on a team like Green Bay, he absolutely could be and would be. Because no one else on the team wins the way he does. He would be complementary to Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks and Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. I told James, would you do 41 and Romeo Doubs for Tee Higgins? He was like, yes. And I was like, send it in. Send it in. I do that trade right now. Right now. And I love Romeo Doubs. No one was higher in pre-draft on Romeo Doubs than I was. I said he was like a mid-day two kind of player. But if I can get Tee Higgins, that is a no-brainer to me. Now, I understand the cost and the questions about the cost. The Packers have the money. They can work this out. And they don't have to pay any of these other receivers for a while still. So I'm just like, I wouldn't be worried about it if I were them. The flip side of this is they have these other needs. Would you rather do it for a defensive player? Could you go out and get a safety? on the trade market with one of these picks? Maybe. But if you can't, then go get a player who can immediately help you and is on your timeline. No, he's not cost controlled, but he's really good. It's fine to pay for really good players. The problem that teams have, rarely is it the case that teams have too many good players to pay. That's just not usually how it works. Eventually, guys age out. You got to move on. You make some bad signings. You make some bad draft picks. And you don't have all these guys come up at the same time. Now, the Packers, they crushed 2022. They crushed 2023, those drafts. In 3 years, they're going to have some issues start to arise if all these players continue the way that they are. But when Zach Tom comes up, who knows? Maybe Elton Jenkins has aged out. You've got, you're the David Bakhtiari money is already coming off the books. Aaron Jones, probably not going to be on the team anymore. So that's money that you don't have. This is always cyclical. So whether it's Tee Higgins or someone else, 25 plus 41 gives them such a great opportunity to go attack the market. Go see what's out there. Go see what you can get to add to this team right now, so long as they're really good, right? Someone who's an actual difference maker, and they fit with your team. And I think Tee Higgins does that. All right, I want to talk about corners. We talked about them yesterday, and I got a lot of pushback from people about the model. I want to talk about that. The Packers need to change the way they evaluate corners. We're going to talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze the special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and help you find that thing so you can do more of it. For me, I would love to be able to read more. I love to read. And as a working parent, that is really hard to find time to do. I'd like to prioritize it more. And I found a little window where I can do it in the morning. It fits into my schedule. And I'm telling you, it has made me feel so much better throughout the day. These are the kinds of things that you can find in therapy. BetterHelp can get you there. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. They can help you find what you should be focusing on, what you want to be focusing on, but maybe you haven't even really given it much thought. Having someone to talk to makes that a lot easier. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So I mentioned the list of corners yesterday the Packers have taken in the top 100 going back through the Ted Thompson era. And I got a lot of responses to it. That it was a list of failure. It's 8 corners in the top 100. 2 of them went on to be all-pro caliber players, Casey Hayward and Jair Alexander. Multiple seasons, they were among the 4 or 5 best corners in the league. Let's just start there. That's really good. That's really good. Okay? You draft 8 guys and 2 of them, so 1 in 4, a quarter of the corners that you've drafted in the last 15 years have been Pro Bowl, all-pro kind of players. Okay, so that's the first part of it. But let's look at where they've missed. Okay. Pat Lee was a 6', 200-pound corner, but we're talking about a 3rd-round pick. He turned into a special teams player and someone who, remember, in the Super Bowl had to play because Charles Woodson broke his collarbone. Tramon Williams got hurt. They were down to baling wire and sheet metal. in that secondary, and he came in and gave them important reps. It's Jared Bush and Pat Lee out there in the second half against Mike Wallace and Big Ben and like that whole Pittsburgh passing game. And they held up just enough. Now, Demarius Randall, they drafted him to play a hybrid. He was supposed to be kind of part safety, part nickel, basically to be what Micah Hyde eventually became. And then it turned out Micah Hyde needed to be this whole other thing. But Demarius Randall, 8.4 relative athletic score. He was someone who had major ball production, but he was playing safety. And they immediately converted him to corner. I always felt like he should have been safety. I had a first-round grade on him as a safety. Eventually, he moves to safety, but by that time, there are a lot of reasons that the Demarius Randall experiment did not work out in Green Bay. Though remember, early on, that first year, as a rookie, he was really good. And frankly, I don't think it was the physical traits that really scuttled his career. I think it was usage. I think it was his own issues. I don't know that he was the most dedicated to his craft, that he had the best attitude necessarily. But he was always playing somewhere that he did not belong. Eric Stokes is really unlucky right now. He was really good as a rookie. Not really good for a rookie, really good as a rookie. Did not have as strong a start to his sophomore season, although in press man coverage or just in man coverage in general, he was good. They just did not play a defense where that suited him. Like he just didn't get a chance to do the thing that he was best at. That's not his fault. That's not his fault. And then he has this catastrophic injury, comes back, and is not really in game shape physically. That can happen. Tweaks a hammy. Comes back, is not really ready to take on the full game load. Did not look anywhere near his explosive and dynamic athletic self in the games that he played. And then gets hurt again. Not how you draw it up, but it's also not his fault. Like that's not a miss because you have an evaluation problem. Kevin King, early in his career, showed a lot of promise. Wins the starting job as a rookie because Quentin Rollins couldn't do it. And there were times early in his career, before the injuries sapped him of his athleticism, that he looked like a cornerback one. You go back to like 2018, 2019, he looked like a legit guy. Injuries, they just added up. And eventually he left because he kept getting hurt. He was just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be rehabbing constantly. I want to play ball. And it was too much. You can't predict that kind of stuff. And then Quentin Rollins was just never athletic enough. You can't run 4.7 and play corner in the NFL. Like that was Ted Thompson getting a little too cute, a little too in his bag. A 4.73 RAS. Like you cannot play corner as a 4.7 guy. Period. End of story. And to my point yesterday, you don't just like take him and have him play safety. No, if he's too slow to play corner, he's probably too slow to play safety. You just can't hang. So this was actually a case, much like we've talked about with Brian Gutekunst. They went outside of some of their preferred models and they missed. Don't do that. Bet on the athletes. Now, Josh Jackson is the one. You go, okay, size, athleticism, ball skills. Why didn't it work for him? Why didn't it work for him? She showed some nice things as a rookie in preseason, was killing it. Why didn't it work for him? It seemed like he lost his confidence, was never able to get it back, never looked comfortable as a press corner, never looked comfortable in man coverage. And so this is going to be one of the questions. You look at someone like Cooper DeJean, mostly off, mostly eyes to the quarterback. Now that's the kind of defense that the Packers are going to play a lot of, but they're still going to play man on third downs in the red zone. Second and short in high leverage situations. They're going to play man and they're going to press. Can he do it? Can you hold up in those situations? Josh Jackson couldn't, did not have the twitch, and frankly, just didn't ever trust his technique. Got way too grabby. And like, that's one of those where I'll always believe on a different team, in a different system, in a different situation, he could have really been something. And situation is just so important for nearly every player. Now, the NFL clearly not as high on him as draft Twitter was, as Packers Twitter was. Certainly we thought, he could be in play at 14 for the Packers. Ends up going at 45. But that was, I kind of don't think that was an evaluation problem. That was not a Packers model problem. That was just he just didn't grow in the ecosystem that the Packers had for him. Jair Alexander did, but he fit better because he fit anywhere. He's just a better prospect. That's why he went in the first. Josh Jackson went in the second. You look at the big swings on this list. They've all shown the flashes. And coaches will always tell you it's up to coaches to get the consistency. Demarius Randall showed plenty early in his career. Eric Stokes showed plenty as a rookie. Jair Alexander, we've seen now he's just a really good player. Kevin King. Injuries for King and Stokes. You hope it doesn't go the same way for Eric Stokes as it did for Kevin King. You hope he can get back to 100% and gets back this year and just plays great. But injuries happen. This is not an evaluation problem to me. This is a little bit of like bad luck, a little bit of bad circumstance, and a little bit of small sample size. Like, we're talking about 8 guys going back to 2010. It's a really small number. It's 8 guys. I don't think there's a problem with the way that they evaluate corners, especially when you find Russell Douglas, when you're able to find Keyshawn Nixon. And they clearly know how to do this. That being said, there's an issue personnel-wise this year that they're going to have to fix. And if this keeps going, if they miss a couple more times, whether it's because of injury or whatever, like, this is a small sample size game. Things happen in a small sample size, and you only get so many chances. If you get a large sample size, it's because you got lucky a little bit in the smaller sample size. So Brian Gutekunst and company has to get that. All right, the Packers cleared a little bit of money with Rashawn Gary. We're going to talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And speaking of the Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo is 15-1 on FanDuel to be the MVP. 15-1. He's the last of a top tier of guys, but Nikola Jokic, -155, the clear heavy favorite to win. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is +220. Luka Doncic, 7-1. But Giannis at 15-1. And you look around, you price shop at the other books, 15-1 is actually the best, longest odds you're going to get on Giannis. I would jump on that. I think they have a chance to finish really strong, and he can get back in this MVP conversation in a real way. Quick bets, same game parlays, exclusive props, and more coming your way at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. One last thing here. Rashawn Gary, the Packers converted money on a restructure, going to save them a little under $5 million here upcoming. That's not that interesting, frankly. This is one of those easy levers for the Packers to pull. It is, though, and I was having this conversation with someone else who covers the league, it is starting to be a change in departure. Like they've been doing this now long enough where you can call it a trend. It used to be that really the only players who had their money restructured, pushed forward were quarterbacks because they were the ones making the big money. And so it made sense to do that. I remember Brett Favre restructuring his deal. And with Ted Thompson, it was pretty consistently just guys like Aaron Rodgers restructuring, certainly in Green Bay. And part of that was they just don't give out third contracts. So you get your rookie deal, you'd get that second contract, and you'd either play it out or you'd get cut while you were on it. Very rarely did guys get third contracts. And when you restructure a contract, we don't need to get into all of the minutia, but what you're doing is you're converting money now into bonus that you can prorate over the life of your contract. So you got 3 years left on the deal. You can take that money and you can push it forward into the future. And when you do that with a quarterback, the reason you do it is because when you have a star quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, he's just never going to see the end of those years at that price anyway, because you're just going to give him a new contract. You're just going to extend him if he continues to play like Aaron Rodgers, which if you're looking at, Ted Thompson, Aaron Rodgers signs the biggest deal ever and then signs another one. Like that's just how ultimately this works with quarterbacks. And so it's okay to push that money forward. The Packers, and it started in 2020 with COVID when they had to move things around. They had to because the cap stayed flat. They were expecting to have more room. The cap has been consistently going up. It ballooned this year. It was $15 million or whatever it was, more than expectations. And so they're going to end up having a little bit of room to play with here. That's nice, but you're still going to do stuff like this because Rashawn Gary is going to be on your team. And they seem more willing to do third contracts for guys. They seem more willing to pull these little levers to create a little more cap space because Brian Gutekunst actually wants to go out and spend money. And the thing is, when you're extending and giving second contracts to your players, and then you want to go out and actually sign free agents, sometimes you have to get creative. You have to move that money around. And what the Packers have been loath to do, and remain so, is to guarantee money after the first year. They just don't like to do that. They'll put roster bonuses and signing bonuses and these mechanisms, but they're not going to go, like I remember when Derrick Henry signed his contract, that second year, I don't know why this sticks out of my mind, but it does, was fully guaranteed. The Packers just don't do that. And so when you sign your deal, Rashawn Gary inks this $100 million contract. Well, if you have the extra years, you can move some of that money out and go, well, if he's going to play through the end of his contract, who cares? He's going to be, if he continues to be Rashawn Gary, it doesn't matter. A couple extra $1 million in 2 years, 3 years, it's not going to change your life. It's not a big deal. And that's true only as long as the guys continue to be the guys that you're paying. And by that, I mean, Zadarius Smith, when they paid him on that free agent deal, and then they had to move the money because of COVID, that would have been fine if he continued to be the guy we saw in 2019 and the culture stuff that didn't go haywire, because that was part of the problem. When you sign, then this is the issue with free agents. The Packers are always 2 years and then we'll see. But there's more uncertainty when it's a free agent, when it's Preston Smith, when it's Zadarius Smith. Only one of those two worked out. And they ended up still having to redo and extend that deal with Preston Smith. Because you move the money, and you go, okay, well, now we got to rework this. But it's always all fungible. It's always changeable because Aaron Jones has his contract. The Packers go to him and they say, hey, look, we can't do this. And they actually changed the money that was in there because his option was get cut He already got the signing bonus. The money that was due on the Packers cap is accounting. It's just fake. It's numbers. He already got the money. So his option was essentially get out of the contract. The Packers would have to eat the dead cap hit, and then he's got to go find a new job, or take a pay cut. And what that allowed the Packers to do was lower the cap hit. Aaron Jones gets the extension, and then you don't have to eat the dead cap. And hopefully you give him a little, into the future. Now that you know you're going to move through that contract, when you terminate the contract earlier, it accelerates all of that future guaranteed money right then. Hits the cap. Bang. But now you go 1 year, 2 year further down the line. Well, now that guaranteed money that you pushed further out, you've already used it. It's already happened. It's already counted on the cap. And so the further down the line you get, the less punitive it ultimately becomes, because even if you have to eat a dead cap hit in year 4, it ends up being much less than in year 2. So I guess the moral of the story is, if you're going to sign big contracts, sign them for good players. That seems axiomatic, right? But the Packers have done a good job of that. And not just that, but because Brian Gutekunst wants to use these other tools at his disposal, they've had to become a little bit more creative and be a little bit more willing to take the risk on a Rashawn Gary. You got to trust your own process and say, okay, if we think this guy is this good, then we shouldn't worry about pushing that money down the line. What becomes problematic is you've got Derek Carr and they're pushing money down the line. That guy is not good and you're already overpaying him. That's the problem. That's the Saints' problem, is they're kicking the can down the road on guys who can't play. Guys who don't move the needle for them. That's not what the Packers are doing. So their ability to organizationally, in conjunction with Russ Ball and Matt LaFleur and Mark Murphy, say these are the guys that we're betting on, that we can, when we need to, push the money down the line. You might get stuck in a situation with David Bakhtiari where you're going to have to eat $20 million in dead cap. But you're saving so much by moving on. You're still saving another 20 because he was going to cost 40 on the cap. You don't want to be in these kinds of positions, but when they signed that contract, they assumed Bakhtiari was going to play 4 years of that deal. When you sign superstar level players, you expect them to play out the contract. When you sign non-superstar, even the Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, those were top of market deals for free agency. Not top of market at the position, but top of market for free agency. And you were thinking, okay, well, 2 years. But then when you have to push the money out, you do that with Zadarius Smith because you think he's going to be a part of your long-term plan. When that plan doesn't work out, that's when it becomes problematic. And so we'll see if the Packers start having to make these more difficult decisions 1 year, 2 years, when the 2022 class, the 2023 class, when they come up for deals. We'll see how they are able to manage all of this. And by the way, be paying a quarterback $50 million a year too. All right, back tomorrow. Much more here as the Combine gets underway in Indianapolis. Everyone is making their way to Indy. I'm still recovering for Super Bowl, frankly. But I'm glad for all my friends that are going to be down there and having a good time. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live on YouTube, we're doing some live stuff for the draft, no question. Live stuff in free agency if the Packers make a move. Go subscribe over on our YouTube page so you can stay Locked On Packers.